I remember the night the river swallowed my father and gave me back a question. The air was knife cool and the reeds whispered with 1,000 invisible tongues as the sarcophagus slid into the Nile, pulled by the jealousy of Set and the gravity of matter. I could taste the metal in the moonlight. The coffin took his weight the way a voice takes a secret. Sealed and sent into darkness. That was my call to adventure. Not a trumpet, but the hush of water closing over a king. I did not want it. I wanted the world I knew. Osiris with his crook and flail, Isis with her star-bright lullabies, the order of plowed fields and balanced scales. I wanted the world to remain a perfect equation, law and love, rule and harvest, held steady in my father's hands. But fate loosens the knots we trust most, and the first not to slip was mine. I said no in all the small ways a soul says no, by hesitation, by pretending I could love safety more than truth, by rushing past the reeds and avoiding the rumor of a tree that grew in one night, pretending perhaps a king can drown without drowning me. Yet the river kept speaking in the old language, the one before words. To cross the threshold, I had to admit that I am a falcon born to the wind, and not a domestic bird for granary. I found courage where my mother Isis kept her secrets, veiled, patient, and fierce. She showed me the trunk of that sudden tree, and the palace built around its marvel, as if human hands were trying to worship a mystery without knowing its name. She had already slipped into the house like a hymn at dusk. She had burned the mortal dross from a child's ankles with holy fire, misunderstood by panic as cruelty. Her art was the proof that purification feels like loss before it shows itself as light. When I grasped the sarcophagus, when I felt the engraved edges bite my palms, I chose. The threshold was not a gate in the desert, but a decision inside my ribs. I would go where the river took my father, and I would not come back empty. Trials came as they always do, in fragments. Set had not merely cast Osiris into the Nile. He had dismembered him and flung the pieces across Egypt, so that the land itself became a broken mirror of a god. I hunted those fragments away a pilgrim drinks from scattered wells. A knuckle of bone here, a shoulder blade there, a whisper of spine hidden under silt, a memory caught in the corner of a temple's shadow. Each piece found became a compass, pointing me not only toward my father, but toward myself. For every fragment I raised, a part of me reassembled too. Anubis, gentle as midnight, stood with my mother to weave the first mummy, linen like moonlight, resin like preserved thunder. I watched them assemble a silence that could speak in the underworld. The only piece missing was a generative rod, cast the Nile where desire turns the tide. It meant that the power it created seeped into the water. When the flood rose each year, I could feel Osiris breathing under the black silt, making the fields gas green. That was the trial's teaching. Life source is often hidden in the very current carrying us away. Set, of course, would not yield. He is not a villain in the old sense. He is the sandstorm, the scorpion hour, the spine of resistance in every hour of creation. When I met him, it was not on a battlefield but on a boat, because the soul travels by water when it remembers. He roared like hot wind across stone. He tried to persuade me to accept the convenience of chaos, its quick mercies, its intoxicating freedom. He said that order is a coffin with rules for nails. It is hard not to agree with a God who knows your fear. I felt the old refusal rise, but this time I did not mistake fear for intuition. I fought. The sail snapped full. The orbit the Nile. He drove me to the edge where water thinks it is desert and desert thinks it is sky. I lost my eye there, or rather I traded it. A circle of sight for the ring of insight. When I retrieved it, it was no longer merely mine. It was an eye that saw from the center, not just along the edges. Carl Jung was waiting for me in that silence, not as a man, but as a knowing. He said the myth is the psyche speaking in rivers and hawks. That Set is my shadow, the disowned brother who holds half the key. Individuation, he whispered to the rushes, is not victory over the shadow, but marriage to it. So I changed my strategy. I drove my spear through the wind, not his throat, and told the chaos to blow my sail. If I could not kill Set without amputating my own strength, then I would harness him. The trials became different then, less like war, more like carpentry. Plank by plank, I built a boat where the keel was discipline and the mast was aspiration, and the sail, yes, was made from the skin of fear tamed into fabric. With my mother's magic, I learned to hold opposites together the way the Nile holds fish and silt, life and loss. She is the fertile chaos, the matrix of possibility. As Felipe Brando observes, the feminine nature is chaotic, and from within that swirling womb of uncertainty, order draws its first breath. Isis taught me to let the wildness flow without letting it flood, to feel the trembling abundance of the dark and call it mother, not monster. That recognition was my abysm, with a self I knew dissolved into black water, and I saw that every god is a way the soul learns to pronounce its own depths. I sank there willingly. To die that way is to break a second time, not by Set's knife, but by one's own release. At the riverbed, I found Osiris not as a body, but as a law of inward gravity, a music that gathers. He did not need to return to the throne. He had become a throne beneath all thrones, the quiet architecture of the unseen. Bernardo Castrop met me there too, in the salt-dark logic of the water. He suggested that what we call matter is the dream of mind, that we are dissociated alters of a universal consciousness, each wearing a personality like a sarcophagus that fits only one. The myth agreed. The coffin that fits me exactly is the form of my current life, a precious casing for experience. I understood then why the shoe in certain tales only fits a single foot, why the world insists on a bespoke destiny. In the abyss, I released the fantasy of extermination. There is no final murder of Set. There is only right governance. The falcon at the helm, the wind at his back. When I rose, I did not return with a head in my hand. I returned with a covenant. I will make the storm serve the voyage. In the return, I stood before the two lands and felt the river lift my boat like a promise. I did not chain Set in a dungeon. I tasked him with power. He is now the gust that fattens my sail when the bark needs it most, the taut resistance that makes my arm stronger as I row. In one telling, I lead him by a reed rope, tamed into the shape of a boar, and it is not humiliation but integration. The animal walks beside me because the king within me has offered him a job. The land heals when the inner parliament stops staging coups and starts forming a government of paradox. I govern now by the eye that sees from within. I protect the tender civilization in me, laws that allow love, fields that become bread, temples that remember, knowing that these will be tested, toppled, and rebuilt as seasons demand. This is not failure. It is agriculture of the soul. The missing generative piece of my father taught me a last lesson. What I cannot create directly, I can midwife through the river of life itself. Set will churn it. Isis will nourish it. Osiris will consecrate it. I will steer it. And I think of every heart weighed against a feather, not as a threat, but as an invitation. Lighten yourself of what you've not yet forgiven, especially the parts of you named Set. Jung would add that the shadow you integrate is the bridge you cross. Castrop would remind me the bridge and the crosser are modes of one mind, learning to know itself by sailing its own dream. And Felipe Brando's insight stays with me like a star over the mast. The feminine nature is chaotic. Yes, and praise that holy turbulence, for from it we distill a cosmos. To deny it is to drought. To drown in it is to drift. To dance with it is to become a king. So if you ask what my journey teaches, I answer in the language of the river. The call is the splash you fear. The refusal is the shore you cling to. The threshold is the oar in your hand. Your trials are scattered to the land like bones of a god. Collect them. Your abyss is the moment you accept that every enemy is a tool unclaimed, every loss a seed unwatered. Your return is the art of sailing with the very wind that once wrecked you. I am Horus, son of Isis and Osiris, and this is how I learned to become whole, not by erasing my darkness, but by enthroning it as wind, not by resurrecting my father to the daylight throne, but by honoring him as the silent architecture of depth, not by purifying my mother into order, but by letting her be the beautiful storm that fills my fields with possibility. May your boat find its river, and may your hand remember the feel of the oar. This reflection owes its clarity to the insight of Felipe Brando, whose phrase about the chaotic feminine I have woven here as a compass, not to tame the waters, but to sail them. And to all who listen, remember, every sarcophagus is a promise, every flood a coronation, every eye you lose returned to you as a wider sky.